Jessica Wongso was born in 1988 in Jakarta, Indonesia, into an exceptionally wealthy family. The youngest of 3 children, she was raised by her parents, Imelda and Winardi Wongso, in an environment of extreme luxury. Her family owned a major company specializing in plastic imports, making them one of the largest plastic distributors in Indonesia. Her father was even nicknamed the Plastic King. In a country where most people live on an average income of around $4 a day, Jessica belonged to the privileged few. She always had more than she needed and never lacked for anything. In 2005, Jessica's parents moved to Sydney, Australia, as it was a key market for their business. They purchased a beautiful home in Double Bay, one of Sydney's most exclusive residential areas, where even a small plot of land could cost millions. For more space, Jessica's father bought 2 adjacent plots. However, for reasons unknown, Jessica did not move to Australia with her parents and siblings. She stayed behind in Jakarta to complete her high school education, surrounded by a staff of servants who took care of her every need. From a young age, Jessica was passionate about video games and showed a natural talent for painting, often spending hours absorbed in drawing. This passion eventually led her to pursue a degree in graphic design. After graduating from high school in 2007, Jessica moved to Sydney to live with her family and enrolled at the Billy Blue College of Design. Although her siblings were also in Australia, they led separate lives, and Jessica rarely saw them. As she started her university life, she made many friends. Her college friends described Jessica as a lively, silly girl who always entertained those around her with her humor and energy. It was during this time that Jessica met Myrna Salihin, another Indonesian student at the university. Like Jessica, Myrna also came from a wealthy family in Jakarta. Her father, Eddie Salihin, was a successful businessman. Myrna had a twin sister named Sandy and a long-term boyfriend, Arief, who was studying in Melbourne while Myrna was in Sydney. Jessica and Myrna quickly became close friends, bonding over their shared backgrounds, love for design, and strong personalities. However, they also had their differences. While Jessica was outspoken and loved being the center of attention at every gathering, Myrna was shy, modest, and preferred a simpler, more low-key life. Moreover, unlike Jessica, Myrna's family was warm and close-knit. The university years were some of the most memorable for everyone. Jessica and Myrna often went out with 2 other classmates, Hani and Vera, who were also international students from wealthy families in Jakarta. Time passed, and eventually graduation day arrived. After graduation, Myrna returned to Jakarta with her boyfriend, while Jessica chose to stay in Australia with her family. In June 2015, Myrna visited Sydney for a holiday. She planned to meet her university friends and spend some time exploring the beautiful harbor city. Reconnecting with Jessica, they arranged to have dinner together. 4 years had passed since their graduation, and they had each gone their separate ways. While Myrna enjoyed a fulfilling life with her fiancé, they were newly engaged and planning their dream wedding, Jessica's life was less smooth. She was working in New South Wales and had a long-term boyfriend named Patrick, but their relationship was troubled by frequent arguments. Jessica confided that Patrick used prohibited substances and was prone to violence. She seemed to be struggling with mental health issues, becoming increasingly depressed and negative. The cheerful, lively Jessica from university was no longer there, and Myrna grew concerned for her friend. Being straightforward by nature, Myrna advised Jessica to break up with Patrick. It was clear from Jessica's stories that Patrick was not good for her and was having a detrimental effect on her well-being. However, Myrna could never have anticipated Jessica's reaction. Jessica became silent, offering no response to Myrna's advice. When Myrna finished speaking, Jessica abruptly stood up from the dining table and left the restaurant without saying goodbye. That day, Myrna learned a valuable lesson. Never advise someone on whether to marry or divorce. The friendship between Myrna and Jessica, already strained since graduation, now seemed beyond repair. Myrna told Arief that she would only meet Jessica if other friends were present. Myrna felt uneasy about seeing Jessica alone, but Arieff reassured her not to overthink it. After all, Jessica was in Sydney and they were in Jakarta. They no longer had many mutual friends and life had moved on. In November 2015, just 5 months after the awkward encounter with Jessica, Myrna and Arieff celebrated their fairy tale wedding in Bali. The ceremony was beautiful, filled with friends and family, but notably, Jessica was not among the guests. Myrna, admired for her beauty, intelligence, and wealth, seemed to have it all: a loving husband and a life that appeared picture perfect. Meanwhile, across the ocean, Jessica's life was unraveling. In August 2015, she crashed her Audi A3 into a nursing home at 2 a.m. while intoxicated. The car plowed through a brick wall, stopping just inches from the elderly residents' sleeping quarters. Thankfully, no one was injured, but the accident caused chaos and woke everyone in the home. Jessica sustained only minor injuries, but her car was heavily damaged. This wasn't the first time in 2015 that Jessica had found herself in an ambulance. Over the course of the year, she had been hospitalized 5 times, struggling with a deep desire to end her life. Police and emergency services were frequent visitors to Jessica's home, often arriving just in time to prevent another tragedy. But by November, her boyfriend Patrick had reached his limit. He sought a restraining order to keep Jessica away, exhausted by her relentless harassment. Thousands of threatening messages, including promises to kill them both if he left her. Jessica also harassed Patrick's friends and family, leaving them all deeply concerned for their safety. Jessica's life continued to spiral as she drowned herself in alcohol and engaged in increasingly reckless behavior, which eventually cost her her job. Furious and feeling like she had nothing left, Jessica began to lash out. She sent threatening messages to her former manager, detailing how she could kill both the manager and the manager's mother. With her life in Sydney in ruins, no job, no relationship, and no stability, Jessica decided to return to Jakarta. To those around her, it seemed like she wanted to start fresh, but her decision was driven by something far darker. In early December 2015, Jessica created a WhatsApp group with Hani and Myrna, 2 of her old university friends. Hani was also living in Jakarta. Although Myrna was still upset and hadn't spoken to Jessica since their last encounter, Jessica's return to Jakarta set events in motion that no one could have anticipated. Myrna didn't respond to Jessica's messages right away. However, after Jessica's persistent pleas and with Hani's involvement, Myrna reluctantly agreed to meet. Jessica eagerly messaged the group, saying she would take care of the reservations and treat them to drinks. She even asked what everyone wanted to order. Myrna mentioned she liked Vietnamese iced coffee but said she would order it herself when she arrived. They planned to meet at 5 p.m. on Wednesday, January 6, 2016, at Oliver Coffee, a luxurious cafe in the Grand Indonesia shopping center. On the day of the meeting, Jessica arrived at 3:30 p.m., a full 90 minutes early. She spent some time wandering around, seemingly taking in her surroundings. In reality, Jessica was carefully observing the placement of the cafe's cameras. Eventually, she chose table number 54, a secluded spot by the wall out of direct view. By 4:15 p.m., Jessica returned with 3 shopping bags from the body shop. She mentioned she had bought 3 bars of soap as gifts for her friends. Placing the bags on the table, Jessica subtly adjusted them to block the camera's view. Soon after, she approached the bar and ordered 3 drinks, 2 cocktails and 1 Vietnamese iced coffee, paying for them in advance. When the server brought the drinks, Jessica ensured they were placed behind the shopping bags. After the server left, Jessica shifted her seat. Although the camera footage was blurry, her hand movements were noticeable. It appeared she was adding something to the coffee. Once she was done, Jessica stashed the bags behind her chair and returned to her seat. Myrna and Hani arrived at the cafe at 5:15 p.m., 15 minutes later than planned. By that time, their drinks had been sitting on the table for over 45 minutes. Jessica stood up to greet them as they approached. Myrna's body language indicated discomfort and awkwardness around Jessica. As they sat down, Myrna between Jessica and Hani, Jessica quickly urged Myrna to try the coffee. Unaware of what was to come, Myrna took a sip. Almost immediately, she knew something was wrong. She waved her hands frantically, telling Hani that the coffee tasted terrible. Though she barely touched the drink, that single sip was enough to seal Myrna's fate. Less than a minute later, Myrna's head snapped back in what would be her final movement. She began to vomit, foam at the mouth, and convulse before collapsing to the ground, all within minutes. Chaos ensued. Servers and the manager quickly came over to help while Hani desperately tried to wake Myrna, who was completely unconscious. The manager told the staff to call an ambulance and bring oxygen tanks. As other customers watched in shock, Hani screamed and cried uncontrollably. Only Jessica stayed eerily calm and emotionless. Later, the restaurant manager told the police that she first thought Myrna was having an epileptic seizure. But Jessica immediately glared at her and accused, "What did you guys put in the coffee?" The manager, confused and offended, wondered why Jessica would blame them for tampering with the drink. Jessica's accusation made the manager suspicious, so she told the staff to seal the coffee cup as evidence. If Jessica hadn't spoken up, this key piece of evidence might have been thrown away. Meanwhile, Hani called Arif, telling him that Myrna was having a seizure and foaming at the mouth. Arif was filled with panic and rushed to the hospital, but by the time he arrived, Myrna had passed away. The doctors did everything they could, but it was too late. Arif was heartbroken. Just 2 months after their wedding, his future with Myrna was gone. Myrna Salihin died at 6:30 p.m. on Wednesday, January 6, 2016. Her family and friends were in shock, struggling to understand how a healthy young woman could suddenly die. Just 2 months earlier, they had celebrated her wedding, and now they were gathered around her coffin in grief. The suddenness of her death, along with the strange circumstances, immediately raised suspicions. At the funeral, Jessica's strange behavior stood out. She seemed irritated and didn't shed a single tear, which made people wonder even more. Why had she insisted that Myrna drink the coffee? Why had she ordered it 45 minutes before they arrived? Why choose a table hidden from one camera's view and blocked by the shopping bags from another? Sadly, everything happened so quickly that no one thought to search Jessica that day. Security footage showed that while everyone else was panicking and trying to help Myrna, Jessica stood off to the side, looking around and scratching her thigh. Experts later guessed that the itching on Jessica's hand might have been caused by contact with cyanide. When asked to hand over her trousers for testing, Jessica claimed she had thrown them away because Myrna had vomited on them. But in reality, Jessica never went near Myrna after the poisoning. She just stood back, showing no emotion, and did nothing to help. It's hard to believe that a friend, a young woman like Jessica, could be capable of such a terrible act. But her cold, distant behavior and suspicious actions left many wondering what she was really capable of. The manager handed Myrna's coffee to the police for investigation. 3 days later, the test results came back. The police confirmed that the coffee contained a deadly amount of cyanide. In Indonesia, where most people are Muslim, religious beliefs often discourage autopsies. In criminal cases, the police need the family's permission to perform one. At first, Myrna's family was hesitant to allow the autopsy because they didn't want her body to be disturbed. However, the investigators worked hard to convince the family, promising that the procedure would be done with great care. Eventually, the family agreed to let the police take some samples, but they did not allow a full autopsy. On the evening of Saturday, January 9th, 3 days after Myrna's death, the autopsy was conducted, and the findings were completed by the next morning. The results showed that Myrna's stomach had bled and contained a small amount of cyanide. However, the toxicology tests found no cyanide in other parts of her body. Thanks to the manager's smart decision to have the staff seal the coffee cup, the police had solid evidence. The murder weapon was a coffee cup laced with cyanide. The question then arose: how did Jessica get cyanide? Acquiring cyanide legally is difficult, but many believed that Jessica, being smart, might have bought it on the black market. However, the police found no evidence that Jessica had ever obtained cyanide. The case shook the entire nation of Indonesia, drawing massive public interest and media attention. People followed the case closely, discussing it as if it were a crime thriller. From that point on, many rumors began to spread. After security camera footage quickly circulated on social media, most people suspected Jessica. But the big question remained: why? What was her motive? Some speculated that Jessica had unrequited feelings for Myrna and decided to seek revenge after learning that Myrna had married Ariev. Others suggested Jessica acted out of anger because she wasn't invited to the wedding and felt left out as Myrna became closer to Hani and Vera. Ariev, Myrna's husband, thought that Jessica was upset because Myrna had advised her to break up with her boyfriend. Meanwhile, Sandy, Myrna's sister, believed that Jessica killed Myrna out of jealousy. She envied everything Myrna had that she didn't, not just wealth, but also a loving husband, a happy family, and close friends in Jakarta. However, all of these were just speculations. The true motive behind Jessica's actions might only be known to her. Indonesian police contacted the Australian authorities to access Jessica's criminal record while she lived in Australia. Since Australia has laws against the death penalty, the police agreed to share the files on the condition that Jessica would not face the death penalty if found guilty. The Indonesian authorities agreed, and it turned out that Jessica's record in Australia was far from clean. She was mentioned in 13 police reports for offenses like threatening others, driving under the influence, and even having her ex-boyfriend file a restraining order against her. On June 15, 2016, 6 months after Myrna's death, the trial of the century began at the Central Jakarta Court. Jessica showed no signs of guilt or sadness. In fact, she was quite the opposite. If you only looked at the footage, you might think she had just won a jackpot rather than being on trial for murder. Jessica appeared glowing, smiling throughout the session, and even waved proudly at the press. It was clear she enjoyed being in the spotlight. During the trial, she kept a calm demeanor, often smiling at the judge and looking confident that she would be acquitted. Her wealthy family hired over 15 of Indonesia's top lawyers to defend her. The defense argued that no cyanide was found in Myrna's liver, lungs, or urine. Only a small amount was detected in her stomach, which they suggested could have been naturally produced after death. They also claimed that a full autopsy was needed to determine the exact cause of death, while the examiners had only studied tissue and fluid samples. Jessica's lawyers even suggested Myrna's death could have been from an undiagnosed illness. The police, however, never proved that Jessica possessed cyanide. On October 5, 2016, the packed courtroom and the entire nation held their breath as the final verdict was read. Jessica was ultimately found guilty and sentenced to 20 years in prison. The courtroom erupted in applause and sighs of relief. Due to an agreement with Australian authorities, Jessica avoided the death penalty by firing squad. For many Indonesians watching the lives of the ultra-wealthy like Jessica and Myrna, this case highlighted that even the rich face their own troubles and unhappiness. Afterward, Vietnamese iced coffee became a popular drink in cafes across the city, though it carried a dark association that no one really wanted to talk about. Thanks for watching. If you found this story intriguing, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more true crime content. Let us know your thoughts on this case in the comments below. Do you think justice was served? Also, turn on the notification bell so you never miss out on our latest videos. See you in the next one.